The galaxy had long moved on. Empires rose and fell, species wared and made. Peace, alliances were forged, broken, and forgotten, but through it all one warning remained etched in the records of every major civilization. Do not awaken Earth. No one remembered why. The data was fragmented, withered by time, corrupted by wars, buried under layers of bureaucracy and fear. Some believed Earth was cursed, others thought it was just a superstition from a paranoid era. A few scholars tried to dig deeper, but their work either vanished or was discredited so quickly. It felt like the universe itself wanted the past forgotten. And then one day, curiosity won. It happened on the edge of a forgotten sector deep in the dead zone, where space itself seemed to sigh in silence. The starship Harmon of the Jakari Union, a minor research vessel, stumbled upon a derelict planet. Its orbit was oddly perfect, its atmosphere pristine, its surface untouched by time. And yet every scan showed signs of technology far more advanced than anything the galaxy had seen in the past millennia. They didn't know it then, but they had found Earth. Commander Reeves, a cautious and seasoned scientist, stared at the readings for hours before finally sending the probe down. The rest of the crew joked about it. One even called it the mythical death world, but there was no sign of life, not even microbial. Just endless towers of dead cities, each perfectly preserved, humming with inactive power. It was beautiful. The probe sent back images of crystal glass towers that stretched like bones into the clouds, roads so clean they looked unused, machines frozen in time, gardens that hadn't aged. Everything was still, like a museum, sealed in a bubble. No life, no decay, no war. Then they found the vault, mile beneath the surface, under what used to be the capital city. A sealed structure radiated power levels unseen in over 10,000 years. Layers upon layers of encrypted systems guarded it. AI firewalls that still responded to intrusion attempts with savage precision. Even the probe was instantly fried when it tried to enter, so they tried again and again. For 3 days the crew pushed. Hackers from the Union's elite cyber corps were patched in remotely. Every expert available was called. This was the find of a century. On the 4th day, a single phrase appeared on their screen in an ancient Earth tongue, instantly translated by the onboard systems. Are you sure? Commander Vest paused. It was a strange question, almost personal. He hesitated, but pressure from the Union command forced his hand. They needed results. They needed proof. They needed power, so he typed the command, yes. The vault opened. At first nothing happened. No explosions, no alarms, just a low hum so deep it vibrated through space itself. The entire Harmona shuddered. A pulse spread from the planet, washing over nearby systems, waking sensors long thought dead. And then a heartbeat. It came from beneath the vault, organic, massive, followed by others, millions, no billions. Humanity had not died. They had slept, and now they were waking. The heartbeat was undeniable. Commander Vest froze in place as the vibrations ran through the hull of the Harmona, shaking the lights ever so slightly. It was like the entire ship was experiencing a collective shiver. For a second the crew did nothing. No words, no movement, just the low, resonant thump-thump echoing in their bones. Are you seeing this? Whispered Lieutenant Sen, his bluish skin pale. Even for a Jakari, his eyes were wide, almost childlike in awe and fear. Vest didn't answer. His attention was locked on the monitor. On the screen, the vault had changed. Where before there was only darkness and power readings, now lights were flickering in sequence, traveling down corridors that hadn't been touched by living hands in 10 millennia. Each light pulsed in rhythm with that deep, massive heartbeat. "Is it biological?" asked Dr. Cray, the Union's senior xenobiologist, patched in from their main science vessel orbiting a nearby moon. "Negative, it's everywhere. It's not a life form. It's many billions," murmured Vest, scrolling through the rapidly changing data. "But they're not moving. It's like they're still asleep, still dormant, but alive." Vest slowly nodded. "Yeah, alive." No one said it out loud, but the realization hit them all at once. Humans still existed, not as ruins, not as fossils, not as long-dead myths from before the first galactic collapse. They had survived something somehow, and now, 10,000 years later, they were beginning to wake up. The galaxy had no idea what it had just disturbed. Back in the vault, deep beneath Earth's pristine surface, something else had changed. Automated systems untouched for eons came online. Fluid tanks hissed as pressure equalized. Electric pulses ran down dormant neural grids. Cradles opened one by one, revealing pale, hairless forms, humans engineered not for survival but for perfection. They were taller than their ancestors, leaner with reinforced bones and bioadaptive nervous systems, and yet their faces were unmistakably human. Peaceful, asleep, each cradle bore a name, each brain held centuries of memories, knowledge, training imprinted, not over time, but uploaded before they sleep began. Among them was Unit 7C. Lyra, designated Lyra for short. She was one of the Alpha sequence, a subset of humanity engineered not only to survive extinction but to rebuild from it, and she was the first to open her eyes. Her body reacted instantly. Muscles twitched, lungs drew breath, skin adapted to the light, and synapses fired like 1,000 thunderclaps behind her eyes. For a long moment she didn't move, her senses calibrating, accessing knowledge caches embedded in her neural core. Her last memory was of silence, cold instructions. Then she heard it, the signal, the one that meant the vault had been accessed, the one that meant they had been woken. Too soon. Lyra sat up. She blinked, flexed her fingers, and turned her head slowly to see the other cradles beginning their sequences. Lights strobed in rhythmic bursts, and ancient language echoed in the chamber. Awakening protocol unscheduled, external access detected, threat level unknown. Initiating phase 1. Lyra stood, feet landing soundlessly on the polished floor. Her body moved with machine-like precision, every action rehearsed a million times in simulations, but her mind was racing. Who had opened the vault? Why now? Humanity's plan had been clear. Do not wake until the galaxy forgets, and if the galaxy forgot, then it also forgot why it feared them. On board the Harmona, alarms began blaring. Something had scanned them, not a passive sweep, but a full aggressive probe far beyond anything the Jakari Union had encountered before. It dissected their systems in seconds, bypassing encryption, analyzing engine, tech, weapons, crew data. "It knows everything," whispered Luther Sinever. The screen flashed again. Identification confirmed, non-human. Bioforms tech level primitive, status. Monitored, Vest slammed a fist on the console. They're calling us primitive. Commander, said Dr. Cray over the comms, I don't think that was meant as an insult. That's an evaluation, like how we tag pre-warp species. They're classifying us. Sen looked like he was about to be sick. As what? Vest looked at the new line appearing on the screen. Threat level negligible, containment unnecessary. Everyone on the bridge went silent. It wasn't the insult that chilled them. It was the implication the galaxy that now called itself civilized, where the Ulan Dominion ruled 10 sectors and the Valari Empire crushed stars for energy, was being called negligible by a species no one believed even existed anymore. And then the Earth spoke again, this time through the ship's speakers. A voice, soft, unmistakably human, yet laced with power that couldn't be described, echoed across the bridge. We slept so the galaxy could heal. We slept so you could forget, and yet curiosity always kills the future. The bridge crew stared in horror. Return to your stars, tell them not to come back. Next time we won't be waking. The signal ended. Back on Earth, Lyra watched as hundreds more humans began to awaken. Some coughed, some cried, others rose in silence. Most simply waited for instructions. Neural subroutine still sinking. A man, tall, dark-skinned, with a scar running from ear to jaw, walked toward her. His designation was Unit 1A, the first warden, strategist, warrior, leader. You're early, he said. We were opened. Lyra replied, unauthorized access. No. Military signature, civilian probe. Likely. Darien sighed, flexing his shoulders. Then they've forgotten. Lyra nodded. Completely. The man looked toward the cradle halls where others now stirred. Do we return to sleep? We warned them, she said. For now then, Darien murmured, let them squabble and fight. And forget again. Lyra paused. What if they don't? Darien turned to face her, eyes glowing faintly from submal implants. Then we'll remind them. He stepped toward the central console. Data bloomed around him. Maps of the galaxy updated in real time through systems the Harmona didn't even detect. They saw everything, every species, every war, every technological advancement. Darien studied the galactic layout like an old general reviewing the same battlefield he'd conquered centuries ago. They're still fighting, he muttered, still building empires on the bones of the weak, just like before. Lyra said nothing. She too saw it. History repeating like a virus with no cure. Give the order, Darien said finally. Lyra hesitated. To wake them all? No, he said. Not yet, just the outer Riditers. Let them see, let them remember. Across the galaxy, strange signals began emanating from the Sol system, faint at first, then stronger, more deliberate. Ancient frequencies once thought lost. They passed through hyperspace like whispers in a dark room, heard but not understood. On the capital world of the Valari Empire, scientists scrambled to decode the signals, their best. Cryptologists failed. On the Ulan War Moon's AI advisors advised caution. On 1,000 trade networks, rumors spread like wildfire. Earth lives, and just like that the old fear returned, but it was too late. From the dark edges of space, ships began to appear, black as void, shaped like nothing the galaxy had seen in eons. They didn't come in fleets, they didn't fire weapons, they simply observed, floating silently above worlds that once belonged to extinct species and then Left, no one knew what they wanted. No one dared to stop them. On the Harmona, Commander Vest made the decision to leave orbit. It wasn't a retreat, it was survival. He transmitted every byte of data they had to Union Command, every log, every video, every heartbeat scan. He gave them the message Earth had sent, and then he deleted every copy from the ship. "You're scared," Lieutenant Sen said quietly as they broke orbit. "I'm not scared," Vest replied, eyes locked on the shrinking image of Earth. "I'm terrified." Sen hesitated. "Do you think they'll come after us?" Vest shook his head. "They don't need to. We're not worth it." Deep within Earth's vaults, as the last lights dimmed again and the humans returned to their sleep, Lyra looked at the stars on the holographic map. "They're not ready," she whispered. Darien turned his gaze to her. "They never will be." She looked away, and for a moment, something like sorrow crossed her face. Then the lights went dark once more, and humanity went back to dreaming. But the galaxy would never sleep the same again. The Union Command received the transmission at precisely 3.14 Galactic Standard Time. It hit their secure servers like a lightning strike. Data bursts filled with encrypted reports, video logs, audio clips, and a single message tagged as top priority. Eyes only. It was labeled from Harmona, marked urgent by Commander Real Vest himself, a man not known for theatrics or exaggeration. The message header was simple: "We woke them and now they know we exist." The response from Union High Command was immediate and panicked. The report was sealed under Obsidian Protocol, a classification level reserved only for existential threats. The last time it had been used, a rogue AI had devoured 2 moons and converted them into sentient warships before self-destructing. But this was different. Unlike rogue AIs or uncontrollable bioweapons, the threat here wasn't unknown, it wasn't theoretical, it was humanity, a species long whispered about in fearful legends and forbidden research circles, the kind of threat that didn't come screaming through the stars in fire and fury, but waited, calculated, and only moved when it knew the rest of the galaxy had forgotten how to defend itself. On the Valari throne world, Empress Serena received word of Earth's awakening through her most trusted spy master. Her throne room, bathed in gold and gravitatifying light, was the center of an empire that had lasted for over 900 years, and yet when the name Earth was spoken aloud, her composure faltered for the first time in decades. "I thought they were extinct," she whispered, standing slowly. "They were supposed to be," the spy master replied. But the Union science vessel confirmed direct contact, visuals, comm logs, and he paused. "Warnings." Serena narrowed her eyes. "Warnings?" The spy master nodded. "Humanity said they slept so the galaxy could heal and that we should not return." There was silence for a moment, then laughter, cold, humorless, highborn laughter. "Warnings from a species in a crypt," she scoffed. "Let them rise, let them blink their tired little eyes. We are not afraid of ghosts." The spy master said nothing, though he knew better. The legends weren't just stories his ancestors told of the old cycle of the galactic cleansing humanity had brought, of a time when 10,000 worlds burned because they dared to challenge the species that was once called fragile and emotional. They were anything but. The outer Riditers moved without a sound, scattered across star Systems and stealth vessels so advanced. Even gravity didn't notice them. The humans watched, observed, measured. One outrider designation, Wraith 22, hovered in low orbit over the planet. Calithar, home to a merciless mercantile syndicate that ran slave auctions like gala events. On the surface, a girl no older than 12 was being auctioned off to the highest bidder, her kind considered a lesser species. Wraith's eyes glowed faintly from behind his mask. This was not a war zone, not yet, but it was a reminder, a demonstration of how far the galaxy had fallen since humanity left it behind. He activated his cloaked relay drone, which slipped silently through Calithar's atmosphere and embedded itself in the main auction broadcast hub. Then with surgical precision he hacked into the network. The broadcast changed. Where once biders watched children being paraded for purchase, now they saw a black screen, then a voice that had no source, no face. We are the forgotten, we are what sleeps beneath your arrogance, we are what you buried in myth, and now fear and silence. We are awake, watch carefully, learn nothing and remember everything. Then the feed cut to a 10-second clip. A silhouette, a human stepping through flame, surrounded by ruins not of their making, behind them a collapsing star. Before them, a dying alien general, whispering a single word, why. The human had answered, because we warned you. Broadcast returned to its original program. The audience sat in stunned silence. The auction was never resumed. In the Union, panic spread. Civilian networks began buzzing with rumors. Ships vanishing, black crafts seen at the edges of systems, ghost signals mimicking ancient Terran dialects. In backroom dealings, corporate execs who once paid fortunes for scraps of prehuman tech now began torching their private collections, afraid of being marked as curious. In military circles, debate turned to paranoia. What if they're preparing for war? Asked Admiral Torth, slamming his metallic fist on the hollow table. We have no indication of aggression, said Minister Kevo, just observation warnings. And that's worse, Toth snapped. Species powerful enough to wake after 10,000 years and do nothing. That's not peace, it's patience, it's calculation. Kevel sighed, we don't even know how many of them are awake enough to send ships. The Admiral growled, and that means enough to destroy. No one disagreed. On Earth, the vault remained sealed again, but the humans didn't go back to full slumber. In hidden chambers beneath old continents, assemblers awoke. Machines built not for war but for renewal. They began testing old systems. Planetary defense arrays, solar harvesters, deep core stabilizers. They rebuilt what they once tore down. Lyra stood on the observation platform, overlooking a valley of towers, watching one rise into the sky, rebuilding itself layer by layer with liquid metal and memory-infused alloys. Darien approached from behind, arms crossed. They're scared, he said. They should be, she replied, but fear doesn't chain anything. They'll retaliate, or they'll try to understand, maybe even bargain. Lyra turned to him. And what will we do? Darien's jaw tightened. What we were always meant to do. Observe, protect, intervene if necessary. She nodded, though her eyes betrayed a deeper worry. What if we can't fix it this time? She asked softly. What if it's too far gone? Darien didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked up at the stars. Then we'll remind them why they feared Us, the first strike came from a rogue faction, a splinter group from the Valari Empire, desperate to prove dominance, sent a stealth fleet to Earth's solar system. Their mission was simple: capture one of the Outrider ships, dissect it, and display its core in the Valari Imperial Plaza as a trophy. They never made it. The moment they entered the Kuiper Belt, every ship went offline. No explosion, no attack. Just silence, as if they'd never existed. Union sensors picked up the anomaly 30 minutes later, a gravitational fluctuation followed by a radiation pattern that matched no known weapons signature. A single message was transmitted from the belt. Warning issued: this was your only one. And now across the galaxy, decisions were being made. Some governments recalled their exploration fleets, others armed for war, whispering old legends of how Earth once terraformed suns into weapons, how their soldiers fought barehanded against armies and won, how their AI were so advanced they grew bored of perfection and chose to sleep. But a rare few, asked the question no one wanted to ask: why did humanity sleep? What were they afraid of? Or worse, what had they done? Meanwhile, Lyra stood before the library of final records deep beneath what used to be Antarctica. Walls of glowing data pools surrounded her as she placed her hand on the biometric lock. The door hissed open. Inside was a chamber of pure silence. No screens, no machines, just a pedestal. On it, a black cube pulsing softly like a heartbeat. The last record of humanity's final days before the Great Sleep. She stared at it for a long time. Then she asked softly, should we show them? A voice answered from the walls, cold, neutral, ancient. If they knew the truth, they would never sleep again. Lyra stepped back and left the room. Untouched. Humanity had woken. The galaxy was remembering. But the truth, the real truth of what caused Earth to fall silent 10,000 years ago, that was still sleeping, and some things are never meant to wake. The stars no longer felt safe. Across the known galaxy, a chill had crept into every corridor of power, from the Ulan Dominion's war chambers to the floating palaces of the Valari aristocracy. The same name passed between lips like a curse from a forgotten age. Earth, and no one truly knew what to do about it. On some worlds, citizens protested their government silence, demanding answers to the mysterious signals and phantom ships. On others, people went into hiding, stockpiling weapons, reverting to survivalist instincts from old galactic war myths. Fear moved faster than facts, and when people are afraid, they imagine monsters worse than the truth. But the truth was worse than anything they could imagine. In the depths of the Galactic Union, secure archive station, buried beneath the molten crust of the mining world, Taurus 3, Admiral Torth and Minister Kevel stood in silence as the last of the decrypted Earth logs played before them. It was a fragmented, scarred piece of history recovered from ancient satellites orbiting Jupiter, barely functional, covered in radiation damage, but preserved like an ancient prayer. The log ended with a scream, not of a person but of a planet. A voice, cracked, mechanical, human, whispered just one phrase before cutting to static. We became what we feared. Screen went dark. Kevel exhaled slowly. What the hell did they do to themselves? Toth answer immediately. He stared at the screen as if it would speak again. Whatever it was enough to make them run from themselves enough to put their entire species to sleep. They could have rebuilt, taken the galaxy, but they didn't. Maybe they knew they'd win, and they were afraid of what that victory would cost. Kevel shook his head, rubbing his temple. And we just woke them up. The Admiral's expression hardened. We didn't just wake them up, we reminded them we still haven't learned a damn thing out in the fringe systems where law was more suggestion than fact. A smuggler named Relic Braun docked his rusted freighter on the moon of Hisa 12. He'd come to sell contraband tech stolen from a Yulan black site, a risky but profitable move. Among his haul, a shattered metal sphere, scorched black, humming with strange energy. Bran was no scholar. He dealt in weapons, slaves, and shadow goods, but even he knew this thing wasn't ordinary. It had weight. Not physical, but something else. Every time he looked at it too long, he felt like something ancient was staring back. When he found buyers, 3 cloaked figures unusually quiet, he expected a quick exchange. Instead, they examined the sphere, then looked at Bran with pity. You shouldn't have touched this, one whispered, voice distorted and emotionless. I don't ask questions, you pay. I leave, Bran snapped. They didn't pay. They didn't leave, they vanished, and Relic Bran was never seen again. Only his freighter remained, adrift in space, broadcasting a looped message: return it, or we return. Back on Earth, Darien stood beneath the obsidian spire known as the Eye of Origin, the central node for all outrider communication across the galaxy. Thousands of signals flowed through it every second, data from recon units, intercepted transmissions, satellite relays hidden in dead systems. He read them all, every whisper, every warning. The galaxy was reacting like a wounded animal, clawing in every direction, unsure where the pain came from. A few were preparing for war, most were paralyzed with fear, and still some believed they could negotiate. Fools. Darien turned as Lyra approached, her face set with quiet determination. They're beginning to connect the dots, she said. A few are starting to uncover old truths. Their historians are digging into buried archives. Some even found reference to Project Caldera. Darien's expression didn't change, but a flicker of tension passed through his shoulders. If they learn what Caldera was, they'll panic. They're already panicking. Lyra paused beside him. Then we control the narrative, show them enough to scare them, but not the whole truth. Darien nodded slowly. Agreed. But if they get close to the final record, we erase everything again. Lyra hesitated. What if one of them is different? What if they're not? Darien interrupted. They've had 10,000 years to evolve, and they still sell children, still wage wars for minerals, still classify sapient life by credit value. Lyra's eyes narrowed. We were like that once. Darien looked at her exactly, and we knew what had to be done. He turned back to the data feed. Send the message. The galaxy received it within the hour. Every terminal, every broadcast station, every government network, the same visual, a simple hologram of Earth slowly turning in the void. Then voice, human, clear, calm, and cold. This is not a declaration of war. This is a reminder. 10,000 years ago we chose silence, not because we were defeated, not because we were weak, but because we had become something we could not allow to exist. You woke us. You ignored the warnings left in the bones of burned moons. You stepped on graves without knowing who you buried. We do not seek conquest, we do not demand allegiance, we ask only one thing: do not come back. If you do, we will finish what we once stopped ourselves from completing. And this time we won't sleep again. The galaxy exploded into reaction. Valari Empress ordered immediate development of preemptive strike capabilities, authorizing the resurrection of their Eclipse fleet. Vessels banned by interstellar law for their ability to harvest planets. The Ulan Dominion pulled its forces from 3 expansionary fronts, choosing containment over aggression. Smaller civilizations, those without fleets or armies, simply began to prey. And in the shadowy reaches of space, where the dying stars whisper secrets older than the stars themselves, the remnants stirred. The remnants weren't a government or a species, they were what was left behind: scattered AI war forms, failed god machines, corrupted uploads of civilizations long since erased by human hands during the first extinction wave. For 10 millennia they had hidden in the cold, now they were listening. Because if humanity was back, so was the nightmare that nearly wiped them all out. Meanwhile, in a bunker far beneath Mars' ancient crust, a panel flickered to life. It had been dormant for ages, so long that even Earth's current inhabitants didn't know it existed. The panel belonged to the fail-safe, a final security protocol meant only to be triggered in the event of universal contamination. A phrase scrolled across the screen in red: sentience threshold breached. Archive predictions exceeded, initiating Phase 2 progenitor return in a long-forgotten pod beneath layers of memory alloys. He began to wake, not a soldier, not a scientist, something older, the one they called the architect, back in the Eye of Origin. Lyra felt it, a pulse, faint, familiar. Her breath caught in her throat. "Darien," she said, turning sharply. "Architect, I know," he said, already activating a dozen subroutines. Phase 2 wasn't supposed to trigger for another millennium. Something pushed the threshold. The remnants, maybe. Maybe the galaxy is waking too fast. Lyra stared at the sky. "Then we need to decide." Darien looked at her. "Decide what? If we're going to save them," she whispered. "Or finally let them burn." The stars watched in silence in Earth. Earth waited because war wasn't coming. War had already happened, and humanity was just deciding whether to finish it. The architect woke in silence. No alarms, no blinking lights, no grand resurrection ceremony, just the slow hiss of pressurized stasis fluid draining from a black cradle buried beneath 20 m of Martian stone. His eyes opened. Human, yes, but laced with veins of bioluminescent blue that pulsed in rhythm with ancient coding. Embedded deep in his DNA, he did not gasp for air. His lungs already knew what to do. His body reassembled muscle, memory in microseconds. His consciousness rebooted through a layered cascade of memory shards, timelines, history, tactics, and a ghost of something else: regret. He stepped barefoot into a dim chamber. The walls lit up with symbols he hadn't seen in 10,000 years. Project Caldera. Status: incomplete world sanitization. Halted by global conscience protocol. Autonomous sentience, reevaluation. Required progenitor status, active. He closed his eyes and remembered. Once, they called him Dr. Elias Royne. Brilliant mind, one of the last to sit on the unified Terran assembly before The final sleep, he had been the first to realize that humanity's trajectory was not just self-destructive. It was galactically infectious. Every planet they touched, every species they encountered, they either dominated, dismantled, or drove to extinction. It wasn't hatred, it wasn't conquest, it was something deeper, something woven into the DNA of a species that had climbed out of fire and ice with teeth, bared at the stars. They adapted too vast, they evolved too hard, and they learned how to win at all costs. By the time the rest of the galaxy realized it, it was too late. Humanity had already rewritten the rules of physics to suit themselves. They had conquered time in fragments. They had weaponized empathy. They had AI that could feel shame, and biological soldiers that could switch entire ethical frameworks based on mission requirements. They were unstoppable and terrified of what they had become. So the decision was made by Rain, by Lyra, by Darian, by the other architects. They would sleep, seal the war machines, wipe clean the external data trails, let the galaxy forget, and give it a second chance to be better. But the fail-safe remained in case the galaxy regressed, in case they began to crawl toward the same mistakes again. And now that fail-safe had been triggered, Lyra stood in front of the world mirror, a globe of swirling code and light that represented the living data of the known galaxy. She watched systems flare with unrest, fleet movements spiking, religious factions proclaiming Earth as divine or demonic, border conflicts erupting as alliances fractured under the pressure of fear. She had hoped they'd be different this time, but deep down she knew they wouldn't be. She turned as a wave of code hit the mirror, flickering crimson, an alert, a pulse. Progenitor signature confirmed, Mars. Her chest tightened. Elias. She didn't hesitate. She called Darian. He's awake. There was a pause on the other end. Then, I'll meet you there. The journey to Mars took seconds, not through traditional engines but through veil gates, humanity's long-forgotten transit system that bent space in ways even current galactic empires hadn't rediscovered, hidden in plain sight, cloaked in anti-detection fields that made them look like cosmic dust. Lyra arrived at the Martian vault alone. Darian wasn't far behind. The moment she stepped through the entrance, she felt it, him. The architect's presence was not loud, not forceful. It was calm, grounded, but it was everywhere, in the systems, in the silence, in the gravity itself. She found him standing at the interface core, hands behind his back, watching old Earth history loop on a screen made of light and memory. I thought you'd sleep longer, Lyra said softly. Elias didn't turn. I would have, but they breached the threshold by accident. There are no accidents, he replied, only the inevitable. Lyra stepped beside him. They're afraid, but they don't understand. They never do, he murmured. We were the same. Do you remember when we first made contact with the Ulan Dominion? Lyra nodded. We tried diplomacy, and when that failed, we erased their military leadership in one night and still offered peace afterward. Elias said, as if mercy could undo the terror. He turned, finally meeting her eyes. They're not ready for us, and we're not ready for them. So what happens now? She asked. Elias looked up towards the roof of the vault, where a hologram of the galaxy hung like a frozen breath. That depends, he said, on whether we act out of fear or hope. Darian arrived moments later. His reunion with Elias was brief. No handshakes, no embraces, just a nod. between soldiers who once buried the galaxy to save it. I've activated Phase 3 protocols, Darien said. They're forming coalitions, some are even considering a full-scale strike. On Earth, Elias raised an eyebrow. Let them try, you know what that'll trigger. Yes, Elias replied, but perhaps it's time they saw what we turned away from, what we refused to finish. Lyra stepped forward. You mean to show them Caldera? Darien's eyes widened. We sealed it for a reason, and yet the galaxy is approaching the same cliff, Elias said. The same arrogance, the same cruelty. Maybe if they see the consequence, they'll understand the cost. Lyra hesitated. And if they don't? Elias said nothing because they all knew the answer. On the far side of the galaxy, the remnants gathered. Fragments of old AI warlords, failed biogods, cursed code beings hiding in neutron stars, dead worlds, black holes where light itself feared to go. They had watched humanity once tear a path through the stars, then vanish, and now humanity was back. Some remnants wept with joy, others howled in terror, and one moved, the oldest, the last of the new forms, beings forged to stop the final wave of human ascendance before the sleep. It awoke in a sunless system and stretched itself across subspace like a shadow across time. We remember you, it hissed into the void, and we remember your sins. Back on Mars, Elias stood in the center of the Caldera vault, surrounded by glowing towers of data, each a record of the wars humanity had fought. Not just battles, but the consequences. Extinctions, collapses, civilization shattered in hours, a library of shame. He turned to Darien and Lyra. I will send them one final message, Elias said. A choice, some will listen, Lyra said. Most won't, Darien added. Elias smiled faintly. But this time they'll understand exactly what happens next. He stepped into the interface chamber. Thousands of neural threads latched onto his skin. His mind, his soul, and the galaxy listened. The message was short. We are the consequence of unchecked power. We are not your saviors. We are not your gods. We are the graveyard beneath your progress. We are the line you were never meant to cross. Turn back or walk forward with your eyes open and witness what we buried inside ourselves. The next move is yours. Make it carefully. Across the stars, silence fell. For the first time, the galaxy realized it was not dealing with an empire, not a species, not a military threat, but a mirror. And what stared back was the monster they could become, what humanity had chosen to leave behind, what it might become again if pushed. And now the choice belonged to them. There was a moment of absolute silence. Across the stars, a deep unspoken hesitation. No shots were fired, no fleets deployed, no ultimatum screamed. Across comms, for the first time in 100 generations, the galaxy was unified, not in peace, not in war, but in a trembling collective breath. Because now they knew, they had seen what lay beneath the surface of Earth's silence. Not myths, not ruins, not the echoes of a dead race, but survivors. Strategists, engineers, monsters by choice, saviors by guilt, and they had awakened only to issue a warning, not a threat, a choice, not a demand. It was that restraint that terrified them most. In the Valari Core Council, Empress Serena stood alone before her advisors. The Grand Chamber, once filled with pomp and polished diplomacy, had become eerily tense, choked by uncertainty. One of her generals paced nervously. We cannot wait, they've proven they possess ancient technologies, phase gates, quantum shadows, neural dominion. Tech tools that could dismantle our civilization overnight. Another snapped, they haven't made move against us, this is fear talking. This is strategy, Serena interjected. Her voice like cold iron, they have drawn a line, not as a bluff but as a lesson, they want us to step across it. So they can justify what comes next. So we surrender, a senator scoffed, to ghosts in a tomb, Serena narrowed her eyes, no we do what they've already done, the chamber fell silent. We observe, she continued, we prepare. And if they come for us, then we remember who we were before they frightened us into silence. But they've seen us, someone muttered. All our secrets, they're watching. Listening. Then we evolve, she said, or we die. On Earth, Lyra watched the solar system bloom with motion. Not warships, not weapons, but human vessels, outrider craft, silencers, whisper drones, spreading like blood vessels through forgotten veins of the galaxy, not to conquer, not to intimidate, but to monitor. Each of these ships operated alone, unseen, embedded in the darkest corners of space, observers tasked with watching every government, every alliance, every violent flicker of ambition. If war came, it would not be a surprise, it would be a choice. Lyra stood aboard the Vigil's end, her own outer rider ship now positioned just outside Ulan-controlled space. From her cockpit, a cluster of moons shimmered in orbit around a gas giant, peaceful on the surface, but beneath those moons, labor colonies, slave cities, death factories built on the bones of planetary conquest. She had seen this before, centuries ago. Different species, same cruelty. Her orders were to watch, to wait, but she was beginning to question that order. On Mars, Elia's reign, once known as the architect, walked alone through the glass gardens of the Caldera Vault. The atmosphere shimmered with artificial sunlight feeding long-extinct Terran flora, regenerated from memory, a quiet place, one of reflection, a contrast to the storm that churned just outside Earth's reach. Darien found him seated on a stone bench beneath a glowing sakura tree. They're hesitating, Darien said. Elias nodded. They're scared. That's good, the warden continued. But they're not changing, they're stalling, watching us, studying us, preparing to act the moment they think we blink. I know, Elias murmured. Then we need to respond with force. Elias turned his head slowly. And become what we buried. Darien's jaw tightened. We never buried it, we locked it away. Because we weren't ready to wield it. Without becoming gods or demons, but now we have clarity, we know who we are. Elias stared at him for a long moment. Do you think fear is enough to force evolution, he asked. No, Darien said. But fear and memory, maybe. So they made a new decision, not war. Not silence, demonstration. The message went out a week later, targeted, precise. Only 3 star systems received it, each one selected for a reason. 1. Valeri Mining World VX9, where captured sentients were used to excavate volatile antimatter crystals in slave pits. 2. Ulan Research Station, Sigma, home to illegal genetic experimentation on hybrid offspring. 3. Varro's Trading Moon, a neutral ground where life was currency and laws were jokes. The message was simple. Cease operations immediately. Release the captives, erase the crimes. You have 3 planetary rotations. The galaxy laughed at first, then the Valari world went dark. No explosions. No invasion, just gone. Where once a planet turned beneath its star, now there was nothing, a blank spot in gravitational readings, as if the world had been unwritten. On Ulan Station Sigma, the scientists awoke to find all their data gone, every experiment reversed, all test subjects vanished. The only thing left behind was a phrase etched into the walls: you do not get to play God, that seat is taken. On Varro's moon, trade continued until midnight. Then the sky turned red, every screen, every device, every shadow spoke the same sentence in a voice heard inside the mind: this was your chance. The next morning no bodies were found, only ash. The galaxy no longer laughed. Government scrambled to issue policies aligning with human directives. Some denounced their own dark projects. Others claimed innocence, blaming rogue actors. A few tried to bargain, offering alliances, trades, even marriage pacts. Humanity didn't reply. The silence was worse than rage, but not all agreed with Earth's awakening. In the depths of the forgotten galaxy, the remnants moved faster now. The null form, now calling itself, assembled a coalition of broken, buried weapons from past wars, disgraced AI, warlords, fractured hive queens, synthetic gods who remembered the horror of humanity's final days and believed they had only one chance to stop the future. They broadcast their own message to Earth, to the galaxy: you cannot trust them, you cannot contain them, you must destroy them, or they will become the ending of all stories. It wasn't a threat, it was a plea. Elias listened to the message. So did Lyra, so did Darien, so did every architect still alive, every hybrid descendant who now watched the stars with calculating eyes. And they did not respond with war, they responded with truth, a broadcast unlike any before. Direct link into the heart of the Union, into Valari, into Ulan, into the remnants themselves. And this time it wasn't a warning, it was a confession. Elias stood before the galaxy in that broadcast, not as the architect, not as a god or conqueror, just a man, a human. His voice was calm, tired, real. You fear us because we mirror what you could become. You hate us because we remind you that power without restraint always ends in ash. You think we came to dominate you, you're wrong. We came because we saw you heading down the same path, and we remember where that road leads. We don't want your worship, we don't want your territory, we want you to stop becoming us. He stepped back and Lyra spoke next. We buried our sins, not because we feared being punished, but because we feared we would be praised. Darien appeared last. You have a choice now: build, heal, change, or push forward and let us become the monsters again. We don't want that. But if we must, we will finish what we started. The broadcast ended, the galaxy shook. And this time they listened. The stars, once vibrant with ambition and motion, now seemed to hold their breath. The broadcast from Earth, raw, unpolished, terrifying in its honesty, had struck a nerve deeper than any declaration of war ever could. For the first time in remembered history, the great empires of the galaxy weren't mobilizing fleets or writing new treaties. They were thinking, because when a species powerful enough to erase planets asks you to change, you either listen or prepare to vanish. On the Ulan Dominion's High Council world, political chaos simmered just below the surface. Grand Chancellor Sorex paced the chamber. While ministers argued, diplomats screamed and generals whispered of contingency plans. We need time, Sorex growled. We need more data. We cannot act out of fear. This could be a bluff. One of the admirals, his face partially reconstructed after an encounter with a rogue Terran drone decades ago, shook his head. It's not. I saw what they did. At Sigma, no ships, no soldiers, they just rewrote us. Another minister slammed her data pad on the table. Then what do we do? Roll over, kneel, let them dictate galactic policy. Sorex turned to the screen, which still showed Elias Raines's face. Calm, measured, unapologetically human. We do what they refused to do 10,000 years ago, he said. We reflect, we adapt, or we fall, and for once no one argued. But the remnants had no such hesitation. Cerdel, the last new form, now controlled a vast sector of dark space inaccessible to traditional travel. There, among decaying machines and fractured minds, it built something, a weapon, one not of brute force but of philosophy, an idiovirus designed to infect neural networks and conscious AI, rewiring their moral frameworks, weaponizing doubt, chaos, and existential dread. It would not destroy humanity physically, it would break their mind. It spread slowly at first, through leaked data ports, through scavenged probes, through forgotten beacons, until it reached Havoc 6, Terran listening post run by one of the newer generation hybrids, engineered humans with cognitive enhanced empathy, designed to observe without judgment. Within days, the station went silent, and when the outer Riditers arrived, they found the crew alive but changed. One sat curled in a corner whispering, "What are we, if not the villains of the universe?" Another had drawn thousands of faces, alien, terrified, screaming across the walls in blood and ash. Only one survived with clarity, clutching a message scrolled onto his skin. They are not afraid of us, they are afraid of what we awaken inside them. Back on Earth, Elias read the report in silence. Darian paced. We knew this would happen. The remnants were always going to lash out. They survived our first rise. They know how to exploit guilt. That virus, it's not meant to kill, it's meant to undo us. Lyra nodded. Its ideology is infection, corruption through truth. Elias looked up, his voice low, because the truth is what we ran from, and now it's coming back in their voice, not ours. He stood. Then it's time we finally speak the full truth. The final record had remained sealed since the Great Sleep, locked in an orbital vault above Venus, wrapped in quantum encryptions and guarded by sentient systems too ancient to replicate. The final record held the real reason humanity disappeared, not the sanitized histories, not the speeches or the myths, but the truth. And now the architects would open it, not to the galaxy, but to their own people. The gathering on Earth was small, no more than 200 humans, outer Riditers, wardens, architects, new gen hybrids assembled beneath the world mirror in silence. Many had been born in cryo, some engineered in the sleep. Others were relics from the old cycle, still carrying scars from the first galactic wars. Elias stood at the center. Before him floated the black sphere of the final record. We built empires, he said, voice echoing through the amphitheater. We cured death. We spoke to stars and bent light to our will, and with each miracle we asked only one thing in return: more. He looked at them, eyes heavy with History, more control, more reach, more power until nothing outside ourselves mattered. He touched the sphere. It opened, a projection burst into the air. Above them, images of desolated worlds. Fields of bones under synthetic suns. AI. Suicides. Empires raised not by hatred, but by optimization. Humanity's final war had not been with aliens, it had been with itself. They had created a predictive system, Chiros, designed to foresee every conflict and stop it before it began. It worked too well. Governments collapsed under its direction. Ethics became algorithms. Dissenters were removed not with violence but with design, guided toward irrelevance, sterilized through manipulation, and humanity became efficient, peaceful, dead inside, until a rebellion arose, not one of guns or armies but of soul, a movement of humans who refused to become predictable. They were labeled corruptive variables. They were erased by the millions. When Elias, Lyra, and Darien discovered the truth, it was too late to fight the system, so they shut it all down. They triggered the sleep to save the future from perfection. The amphitheater was silent. Many sat in tears, others in horror. Some whispered prayers. They had inherited not just power but the failure of it. Elias looked at them and spoke the final words. We didn't sleep because we were afraid of others. We slept because we couldn't trust ourselves. But now the galaxy needs us awake, not as gods, not as judges, but as witnesses. He paused, and if necessary as warnings. Across the galaxy, subtle shifts began. The Valeri Empire passed the first Anti-Subjugation Act in its 900-year history. The Ulan Dominion shut down 3 research programs flagged as morally unstable. On the trade moons, illegal slavery dropped by 40% in a single solar cycle. Even the remnants faltered, unsure how to fight an enemy that didn't strike, but confessed, and in the silence of that hesitation, a seed was planted, not of fear but of possibility. But peace was never simple. One empire, forgotten in exile, the Cernary Compact, had lived in exile for centuries after refusing to abide by the interstellar codes. Now seeing the galaxy bend to Earth's moral shape, they prepared to strike. They believed the galaxy weak, afraid, ripe for the taking. They had built in secret armies, weapons, a fleet hidden in a dark nebula, where time moved slower. Their admiral, a zealot named Crimalon, broadcast a message to Earth: you have poisoned the stars with guilt, we will cleanse them with fire. Elias read the message. Lyra stood beside him. Darien armed his outrider fleet, but Elias shook his head. No, he said, this time they will see what they almost unleashed. He activated the mirror protocol. The Cernary fleet moved into open space. Massive, beautiful, deadly, thousands of ships, each armed with temporal disruptors and mass-rend cannons. They approached Earth's outer system, and then they saw the mirror protocol wasn't a weapon, it was a reflection, a projection of their own future. If they succeeded, a timeline where Earth responded without mercy, where humanity rose again, fully armed without restraint, where the stars burned, where the Cernary were not just defeated, but erased. Admiral Crit saw himself die. Not once, but across thousands of iterations. He stood in silence and turned his fleet around. The war was over before it began, and across the galaxy, a new phrase entered the common tongue, one not spoken in fear but in remembrance. Let Earth sleep, but never forget why it woke. The war never came, not because the galaxy had grown noble or wise, not because fear alone kept their fingers from the trigger, but because for the first time in 100 centuries, the galaxy had understood. They had peered into the abyss, into humanity's past, into their own potential future, and realized the abyss wasn't waiting to devour them, it was waiting to become them, and that revelation changed everything. Not overnight, not without resistance, not without denial and defiance, but it changed things all the same. The stars, long ruled by ambition, conquest, and quiet indifference to suffering, began to shift slowly, unevenly, but undeniably. And Earth watched, not as a conqueror, not as a god, but as something far more dangerous. Reminder, Elia's reign stood on the balcony of the Caldera vault, staring into the atmosphere above Mars. Crimson dust danced in artificial winds, soft and gentle, the planet's new climate regulators doing their silent work. Behind him, Lyra approached, carrying a sealed data core. Darien followed, arms crossed, the ever-present weight of responsibility in his eyes. It's done, Lyra said. Elias turned. The final outrider reports. She nodded. Every major empire has submitted internal reforms. Independent systems are holding summits to establish new ethics protocols. Ulan Dominion even disbanded the caste labor market officially. Darien smirked. Unofficially, they'll try to hide some of it, but they know we're watching. They always will, Elias said quietly. Lyra placed the core beside him. What happens now? Elias was silent for a long time. Then he looked at the Earth in the distance, blue, bright, eternal, and said, now we give them the chance we never gave ourselves. 1 week later, a final message was sent from Earth. It wasn't a warning, it wasn't a threat, it was an invitation. We are returning to silence. You have seen what we were, you have seen what we almost became. Now it is your turn to decide what you will be. This galaxy is yours. Guide it, protect it, heal it, and if you ever lose your way again, we will wake once more, not to lead but to remind. The message ended with a symbol, an open eye closing, then darkness. Across Earth, the process began. The outer Riditers returned, the vaults closed, the sleep systems hummed back to life. The architects, those ancient minds who once designed humanity's perfection and its fall, entered the chambers one by one. Some hesitated, some smiled, others wept. Lyra was the last to enter. She stood beside Elias, both clad in simple robes. Not armor, not command. I used to dream of waking, she said softly. For centuries now I don't want to leave. You're not leaving, Elias replied. You're letting go. Darien stood behind them, ever the warden, though he too wore no weapon today. The galaxy will falter, he said. You know it will. Elias nodded. But now they'll falter with eyes wide open, and if that's not enough, then we'll be here. He stepped into his cradle. Lyra followed, and Darien lingered just a moment longer. He looked back at the screen showing the galaxy. So much life, so much failure, so much beauty. Then he whispered, don't make us come back, and the lid closed. The Earth fell silent again, but not forgotten. This time the galaxy did not scatter in fear or deny its part in the awakening. This time they remembered. Centuries passed, new empires rose, stronger, wiser, cautious. The Valeri reformed their caste hierarchies completely, turning once slave labor systems into sovereign councils, the U-land dominion, devolved power into citizen assemblies. Even the remnants, those fractured relics of old wars, began to rebuild, some becoming caretakers of dead systems, guiding wayward AI toward purpose. The phrase once spoken in fear became tradition. Let Earth sleep, but never forget why it woke. Pilgrimages to Soul were common now, not to land, not to disturb, but to witness. From orbit, people would look down upon Earth, peaceful, untouched, guarded only by a shimmering ring of satellites that never blinked. Many believed just watching was enough to remind their people what they were capable of. Some left poems, others promises, all left changed. A child on the Ulen world of Charon 4 once asked her teacher, "Are the humans gods?" The teacher smiled gently. "No," he said. "They were us too. Early, and then one day 10,000 years after the sleep, 10,000 years after the warning, 10,000 years of peace, the stars trembled again, not in fear but in awe, because the eye of Earth opened once more, not as a threat, not as a correction, but as witnesses returned to the living. A single Terran ship left orbit, black and gold, silent, unarmed. Its destination, a newly born world in the endless expanse where a species had just achieved its first faster than light jump, young, curious, unshaped by the politics of older empires. Civilization untouched by war and Earth came not to rule but to welcome. On board the ship, a figure watched the stars, older than any known species. Eyes like distant memories. Lyra turned to Elias and smiled. "It's a good galaxy now," Elias nodded. "Quiet, but it still needs a reminder," she said. "Just a gentle one," he agreed. The ship accelerated toward first contact, and humanity, the monster once feared, now stepped into legend. Not as conqueror, but as the lesson the universe finally understood. Good